grew up at the Jersey Shore with my grandparents from Brooklyn, and art was never ever going to be something that was going to be taken seriously as a career. So that was just, not a thing. I always drew, was very creative. It was not encouraged. Academics were encouraged. You had to get a real job to take care of yourself. So no art classes through middle school, through high school. I think there was probably something mandatory in middle school, but when I graduated, I was still living with my grandfather and kind of taking care of him, and I worked. I always worked. Started working at 12 on a fishing boat, actually, the Jersey Shore. I went to a community college, and I got an associate's degree. But during that time, I did take one art class at the community college with a professor named Dr. Schoenfeld, who absolutely changed my life, because that one art class was the first time I got feedback, except for like doing Christmas cards and stuff, on my artwork. And he told me that I was really talented, and that artwork was something, or making art was something I should and could pursue. And I remember saying at the time, no, I need to make a living. I plan to probably go to law school, something more real. And he said, see that car I'm driving? See that car my wife's driving? I made a living at making art. Go to New York, figure it out, hustle. There are plenty of ways to make money in art. So he gave me the opportunity to see that this was something that you could do. You didn't have to be a starving artist. Anyway, so there was Parsons School of Design. I decided if I was going to give it a try, I would want to go to one of the best schools. If I were good enough to get in, then I was good enough to do this. If I didn't get in, then never mind, I'd stick with the academic plan. So Parsons School of Design had an open portfolio day. I made a portfolio secretly and went up on the train, showed my portfolio, and got accepted. And in fact, it was funny because at the end of the review, I remember saying, like, well, I kind of need to know now because I have to make a plan, and if it's not this, then I have to, work something else out. And he said, okay, you're in. It was the old days. And I was like, great. And went down, found myself a place to live off the board. I knew the only thing I could afford at that time was, actually, that's where I start. There. I secured a room for myself. I don't know how many of you are from New York City, but at the Sloan House YMCA. It was an SRO at the time. I don't know if you all know what that is, a single room occupancy hotel on 9th Avenue and 34th Street, which was not a nice neighborhood at the time. My room for $175 a month was 7 by 11 foot, solid concrete with a steel door, and slept with the lights on because the roaches were so bad. Anyway, I was proud to have it, very excited to be in New York and start my art career. Immediately got a job waitressing on the side, and just, this is a side note, not connected to art, but it was a very small team at a restaurant called Formerly Joe's on West 4th and West 10th Street, and our chef was Anthony Bourdain. And he was Tony then, not Anthony Bourdain. And we were a very small, very close team because the owner had a reputation. We all thought he had, there was a story that he had killed somebody with his bare hands. So we all were very close and protected each other and worked hard and were afraid all the time. So, and school by day, that by night. And that's Parsons, my junior year. So I worked really hard. I did double majors. I did communication design and illustration because I remember Dr. Schoenfeld saying, you can make a living at art as long as you do all kinds of things, diversify, work hard, figure it out. So I knew I needed to work. So communication design meant I might be prepared for advertising, graphics, that kind of thing. Illustration, because I could draw pictures. Junior year, I went to Parsons in Paris. Got a job in the basement making sandwiches at a cafe because I didn't speak French well enough, at all, actually. I had a professor in my junior year there that said he shared that his graphic design firm was submitting wine labels as part of a competition to design the Victor Berard Premier Côte de Rhône wine that would be debuting that next fall. And I said, well, why can't we do it? And he said, well, because you're an American student. And that's not how the French work. And anyway, he ended up making, because I was very pushy about it, he said, okay, I'll give you all the same assignment, design the wine label, here's the information, and if one of them turns out to be good enough, I'll submit it through my firm to the vineyard and the contest. Anyway, long story short, I won it. And so, but nobody wanted to tell the Victor Berard Côte de Rhône people that it was an American student who designed their premier wine label. Anyway, I sort of secretly, I got a lot of art supplies, was invited, the designer was invited for the big premiere weekend in the fall, which would have been really nerve-wracking to show up, but I couldn't anyway. I was already back to school and doing my thing in New York, so I never did get to go. But the wine label is out there somewhere, and anyway, so that was kind of exciting. But that, they started me with the idea of, like, if you just give it a try, give it a try. I think that's the theme of my work life. So came back to New York, graduated, and got a job. I was still waitressing. Got a job at a small advertising agency, ad firm, doing storyboard work. I don't know if you all know what storyboard work is, but it looks like that, sort of laying out the bits and pieces of a commercial, or sort of telling the story visually, right? Could be for movies, for television, or for commercials. It was commercials at the time. I was doing some of that for the agency I worked for, and someone else that I knew also had gotten a couple of children's books through a small company in New York, and then was messing up on their deadlines a lot. And I said I could probably do it for them, and then I ended up really doing it for them. And so on the side, I did a couple of children's books. Oh, here we're jumping ahead, but I'll just go back to the storyboard work. And at that time, I was living on 3rd Avenue and 33rd Street, actually, and working at a different restaurant and doing the part-time work. And a couple of the guys who used to come to the restaurant all the time were already comic book artists. One of them in particular, Dennis Cowan, was a very successful comic book artist, and the other two were pretty good at being comic book artists. They all had work published, and one of them was doing a lot of storyboard work for ad agencies. Anyway, we became friends at the restaurant, and they decided that they needed somebody to organize their studio, and I needed a place to make art, so they invited me to join their studio, Studio X, which I did. Came in as their sort of run the place, be bossy with them, and tell them to get their stuff done on time. That was my big forte, getting stuff done on time, and that was my introduction to comics. So I came in doing storyboard work with Jim, and also that was the first opportunity where I started working. He was doing storyboard work and said, if you can work in my style, you can share the work with me. So I started working in his style. I thought, I can do that. Then he was also doing a Flash Gordon cartoon in the newspaper, which had a set style. And he was overworked and felt underpaid. And he said, could you do some of this Flash Gordon work? And I said, yeah, I can work in that style. Sure, why not? I could do that too. And anyway, that's one of the themes of the work. So I was doing Flash Gordon, storyboard work, and the other guys were doing comic book work. So now we'll go to the next one. So one of the guys, Dennis Cowan, when you do the interiors of a comic book, they'll often offer you the cover to paint, do the straight artwork for. And he got this, it was very exciting for him at the time. It was his first Batman book, and they offered, it's a graphic novel, to paint the cover. And he came back and said, he was colorblind and very concerned, therefore, about painting the cover. So he said, I'll draw it and you paint it, and we'll give you credit, and let's be a team this way. If I'm going to start getting covers, you can paint them. So I said, okay, and that's the original, and that's the cover of the book. And that was the first way I started in comics, and I started doing all of his paintings for his covers. And then I got introduced around. At that time, there were very few women in comics. Marvel, DC, comic book guys were all nerds, you know. They weren't the quarterbacks of the football team, so the editors were really pleased to see a fairly nice-looking young lady coming in, and I could draw and I could make my deadlines, and so you know you had to do the work, but I did get some attention for being the girl in the building, and you know, and so we just kept going, doing work for him, and then I don't know if you know how comics are made, but it's kind of you know, it's a team. You have an editor who has the script, right? And then somebody pencils on a big board, and then somebody inks, might be the penciler, might not be. It's usually two different people because very few artists can do 28 pages of all 3 jobs a month, right? So the penciler and the inker, these are all done by me, but then the inker inks right on top of the pencils and erases out the pencils, and then it goes to a letterer, and then it goes to a colorist. In the old days, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how much you guys know about comics, and I don't know if this is interesting, but when I started in the 80s, they would still print the books on, you know, real newsprint paper, and it was pre-computer, right? So the way you would color them is you'd get this color chart, and you'd have to color only in these 25% increments of color, because the people who were separating the film for printing purposes, you know, they print yellow, red, and blue, right? Could do it in 25% increments. So these are your color choices. It's 127 choices, and you'll see, kind of like that. This is blown up, and then you'd code the whole thing. You'd write the codes all over it, and then that would go to the separator. So they would read, the codes were the language, that you only colored the guide this big as your own way of seeing the story in color, right? And then, but they only really cared about the information. So that's in newsprint, and that's what it would look like printed, kind of dull, and that's on a higher quality paper. And you would see the colors more because the ink would literally sit on top of the covers would be higher quality, and it would be brighter. So, like, that's one of the examples of a book Dennis and I did, and those are codes I've written. So you would color it, and I could tell you any color on there, or just colors in general, and I can read that it's the percentages of red, blue, and yellow just by eye. So you'd code the whole thing and hand it in, and then it got going. And then a few years later, computers started coming into the business, and there were computer houses, and you could have, they weren't cutting film anymore, and then you could go down to 10% color. So you started getting more nuanced color tones. Like if you, just to go back, like Asian, like you'd have to, that Asian fellow down there, and just skin tones in general, it's so few choices, right? So he'd be pale yellow, Y25, wasn't even pale yellow. For black skin, you had 2 colors. In printing, I colored it, you know, looking kind of brown, but ultimately in the printed comic book, it would be kind of like purple or like maroon. So really limited, but those were comics, and you know, they're kind of great just the way they were. But then you got an opportunity for more nuanced color. We got Prince's people called and asked us if we, Studio X, would do, and Dennis, do a comic book for Prince. So this was what we worked on, and I did the cover, and I painted all the interiors, and it was, as far as I know, the first and only Prince comic book. So that was kind of cool, because I was a big Prince fan. Anyway, and the work kept coming, and then eventually you didn't need codes at all, because then they had artists on the computers. So I would still paint my guides, but the people on the computer knew what they were looking at, because they could interpret it, because they were artists. Eventually, so then it was started to be Batman and Superman and everybody. And I did pencil and ink from time to time as well. But I found that penciling was as long as there was an eraser in sight, I was never gonna be done. So it was like fix it, fix it, fix it. At least with coloring and painting, I could picture it in my mind and know when it was done and move on. And that's important in comics and all art business. Get the stuff done and get it done on time. So then computers came. We all got our own computers, learned how to do it in Photoshop, and that's how it's still done. So guides are obsolete. Now I can paint stuff in the computer, organize it, and send it right to the company for printing. I'm going back. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, just a variety of. I've hundreds of comics I've done in my life. I've got pages and boxes of the original artwork and the printed comics. Anyway, eventually, Dennis, I have a thing here, hold on. That's Dennis, who started with Studio X with, and his 3 childhood friends, Dwayne McDuffie and Derek Dingle. They grew up in Queens, being real comic book fans, and never saw, or rarely saw, characters that looked like them. So fast forward, they grew up. Derek started Black Enterprise magazine. They were all still friends, and Dwayne was writing for SCTV and in comics, trying to get characters that represented all shapes and sizes and colors of people into comics, and he was having a hard time doing that. It was primarily white. And they decided to start Milestone Media. And I was in there with them right from the beginning, and that's what we did. So we moved Studio X from 24th Street over to, no, we were on 24th Street between Lexington and 3rd, and we moved over to 24th Street and 7th Avenue, got a much bigger office, got an entire staff of all color, shapes, and sizes, and started the first and only multicultural comic book company dedicated to doing, we had everybody represented by the writers themselves who were representing their stories, their own history in comics, and the world. It was a universe that we invented called Dakota that was reflective of New York City or any major city at the time. It had political issues in it. It had all kinds of adversity. It was much more realistic. Even though we had superheroes, they were much more reality-based than, say, Gotham. Well, Gotham was kind of New York City-based, but say Metropolis, right? So just speaking in comic terms. Anyway, I was a color editor. I designed and assigned the color to the entire universe of Milestone Media. That means every character's skin tone, costume, their special effects, all the color I got to pick, and that was really great. And the other thing is, so I decided that those, I mean, maybe you can see it. Oh, sorry. Maybe you can see it down here. These paintings, these pictures are hand painted. I decided that we wouldn't computer color them at all because I wanted some grit and some texture. The world needed to be a little bit more realistic, a lot more skin tones, just the energy of sort of just being real, you know, something different. So I decided that the whole world would be hand painted. It would be camera-ready art. That means we were hand painting all the pages on a thick watercolor paper, and it would be camera-ready art, no computers at all, except, you know, for the printing stuff. And that's how we did it. So if you see one of these books today, these are my pages and covers. The interior, we had probably that's too much detail, and I don't want to take too long. We had the distribution deal was with DC Comics, and part of that distribution was also the cost of printing. So they gave us a really lousy paper. So all that beautiful artwork was, like you saw before, the ink was sucked right into the paper, so the interior pages never got you weren't able to see them as beautifully as they were created. But the covers were smashing, and and the interiors were, the art is still, I still have a ton of it, but and eventually we were able to upgrade some of the paper, and but that was a whole world, and we got big fast. It was really exciting. It's me at a convention. I used to go to conventions and sign autographs, and people would come. That's me with Icon, one of our characters. It's me with some of the guys. I was made into a trading card. I used to look. I had hair. I had a lot of hair. I didn't have all those lines on my nose. I didn't draw me. Somebody else did. That's me. We had a big internship program. Lots of young, mostly black boys, guys. Not too many girls, but who were going to the high school of design. Everybody wanted to be an intern. It was so exciting to have these comic books, and these stories being put out there. So it was awesome. So that's me and one of my assistants, and that's Jeanette Kahn. She was the president, editor-in-chief of DC Comics for years, one of the few women in the business, and that's me with hair again. Anyway, yeah, so we did that for years. It kept going. At some point, I decided I wanted to go back to being freelance. I always got itchy. That was the first and only long-term, like in a job, still making art, that I did. And then I went back to freelance, I don't know, mid-90s or something. And I started in animation. I got a job with, I knew about it. It was happening. Somebody had offered me to work on Anna Karenina animated movie. I think it was Disney, on the side, freelance, and I did that, and I liked it. And so then I got a job with Nickelodeon, which ultimately Doug became Disney too, and it was designing, drawing, and painting all of the scenes for the animated show. And I don't know if you know how that's done, but that would be a background. That's what I would design, paint. You'd get the script. It's just like comics, really. Get the script, work out what needed to be in the scene, how you wanted it to look. It had the prescribed look because it's Doug, right? It'll have to look like that. And then another team of people would be doing the things that moved. And those were separate. And then everything would get sent to China, and all the in-betweens, we would get paid to set up the design, the colors, the look, and then all of those little in-betweens that would, say if you have an animated as flashing, right? That was done en masse someplace else. But, so that's Doug. And I don't know how many of you, well, Kristen is really familiar. She's a big fan. And big jump. So I did animation for about a year and a half, and I got a call one day, and then I went back to comics. I was doing some comic stuff, and I got a call one day from an acquaintance who was a set decorator, and very successful set decorator, and she had just gotten a show called The Good Wife. She remembered that I was a comic book artist, and she looked me up because one of the first episodes of that show, they had a character that was creating a graphic novel, and that artist, that character, the character needed to have a studio filled with the artwork for his graphic novel, right? So you can't just start sticking up comic book work in his studio because it's all owned and you'd get sued, right? So it had to be original comic book art. So all levels of completion that he might have, drawings, pencils, inks, filling his studio. So she found me and said, remember, you're a comic book artist. Is there any way that you can do, I need all this work, maybe 75 pieces of artwork for this comic book artist studio in 3 days. And I was like, sure, no problem. And it's actually, so that conversation went like this. Sure, I can do it. 75? Yeah, okay. How long? Oh, 3 days? Oh, okay. And then she said, And oh, okay, that's great, that's great. All different things, like sometimes on napkins, things you might have in your studio. And then after that, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, after that, I'm gonna need a Frank Lloyd Wright style architectural rendering of an iconic building in Chicago. Is that something you could do? I was like, oh yeah. Sure, how much time do I have on that? And so, so I said, sure, I can totally do that. And I said, I can do anything. I literally, I mean, I remember because afterward my daughter said, so I said, I can do anything you want. I mean, you need a Frank Lloyd Wright, or a Basquiat, or a Van Gogh, not a problem. Anyway, I hung up the phone. My daughter said, did you just say you could do Van Gogh? I was like, I think, yeah, I did, actually. She goes, you're doomed. I was like, yeah, now I know. Anyway, so that's how it started. So I did all the comic book work for that particular episode for the show. And that started a 15-year relationship with her and all the different shows she worked on, which grew into working for other art directors and set decorators for other TV shows, because at the time when I said I could do anything, I couldn't really do anything. I just pretended I could, and caught up very quickly, really quickly, because very soon after she asked for a traditional old style, Turner-like painting, and I pulled out oil paints, and then, then quickly, like, that's never gonna dry in 2 days, like, oh my God. And so I, started working in acrylics and lost a lot of sleep, and it just got better and better and better. So, and also just I mean, it might be interesting that TV, mostly until that point, and a lot of other shows, would rent prop art. They had houses of prop art, and they would just go in, the set decorator would go in, pick some, and stick it on the walls. They were not overly invested in the looks of the show, most of them. The Good Wife had a huge budget. It was the first time where, I think was the first one, where they were really starting to invest in the look of the show as a thing itself. They were starting to cross-market. The set decorator of The Good Wife would tweet in real time while that show was happening, so people could say, oh my God, I love that couch in Alicia Florrick's apartment. Where is that from? And she'd say, oh, Mitchell Gold. And I'm like, not kidding. And I love that, the wall color of Alicia Florrick's dining room was sold out. It was this purple mauve color, Benjamin Moore, I should know the name of it, I don't, was sold out for 2 years straight. It was the best-selling color that they ever had because it was in Alicia Florrick's apartment. Anyway, so that interest in the look of that show and the budget they had meant that set, so she wanted art everywhere. They wanted art everywhere. The law offices had a corporate art collection, right? So you needed art that looked like it was from all different kinds of artists, right? And their apartments and their houses, there was art everywhere. I don't know how many of you watched the show, but anyway, I did all of that. And it was really exciting and really fun, and everything was due yesterday. And the descriptors of, yeah, I need a Turner, and not too much gold, a little pink, a few clouds, no cows. Okay. I need it by Friday. Okay. So that's how it went, and I got better and better, faster and more efficient, and never said no. And I did so many shows, but these are some of them. The Good Wife in particular, that whole Chicago thing, I painted every building in Chicago 100 times. I don't know. I know I could draw you the skyline right now just from memory. I came up with as many styles as I could think of. I've done Wrigley Field 5 times in 5 different ways. They're just 2 of the Chicago theater. They look kind of the same. They were supposed to be kind of the same. I got better and more diversified as I went, but so much Chicago. Look, more Chicago. The bridges, Navy Pier, yeah. And then I got very good at buildings in Washington because there was a lot of law offices and judges' chambers, and so they wanted a lot of those kinds of buildings, architectural renderings, which I really like. I like staying in the lines. Abstract is a little harder for me, but I like order, so, and some of these are like this big. I mean, some of these are huge, and I'd have to box them and send them. Sometimes they'd send a van. They did a lot of this shooting in Brooklyn, but a lot of it was just paint it, wrap it, throw it in a box, and UPS it. And so it's funny because people used to say, "Can I come to your studio and see your art?" I was like, "I don't have any art. I just do it and send it, do it and send it, do it and send it." Anyway, so this is some examples of walls, right, in the show, and you can see how much art is around, which I did, all that. The Good Fight, Mitchell Gold, you see the tie-ins. And that's one of my paintings next to the chair in their advertisement for I think that was The Good Fight already. How am I doing? Okay. Lots of different kinds of art. It's funny, to me, that like that falcon, I could do that little perfect stuff like all day long. That abstract, I had to do that 4 times. I could not. I just never knew when it was done or balanced or right. It was just, and you'd think it would be the opposite, right? Then you just throw stuff at it and be done. But I really like the clean stuff. Anyway, all different kinds of things. So, for example, and then the rules and shifting of things. This was for, I don't remember what this is for, but I do remember the setup was that it was for a gift for a producer. It was a Broadway show, a Broadway producer, and this was going to be for his office. And they wanted it to feel like a New Yorker cover, and so, okay. And so I came up with that, which they okayed. And often I didn't have to get anything okayed. They had no time. We had a working relationship. They trusted me. And I just said, okay, and then do it. But this one I was like, So they said okay to that. Get rid of the glasses on that lady. Too old-fashioned and whatever. So, okay, went to the painting. Finished the painting. They loved it. It was all great. I think as I was boxing it, she called me back and she said, "Oh, you know what? Somebody said, and I kind of agree, they all look a little stern, like a little curt or something. They need to look a little happier." And I was like, "Okay, I'll put smiles on their faces." And she said, "Well, not like smiles. Like, they don't need to be like happy, just like amused." I was like, "Okay, amused." So, I don't know. They look curt, now they look amused. I don't know, they were happy. This was a huge painting, by the way, big. So that's how that went. Okay, so then I was doing movies too. Sometimes I'd get a call for a weird one. I know apparently this has been here a lot lately. I don't know if you've come to other lectures, but this Hieronymus Bosch painting has been featured a couple times recently. So I have to breathe. This is for a movie called Daniel Isn't Real. And it was a horror movie that I got a call and they said, "Do you know this Hieronymus Bosch painting?" I have a lisp, so it's a little hard. And this is a 13-foot wide painting done in 1490, 1500, something like that. It's an amazing painting if you've never seen it. And it's crazy. And I could do a whole talk just about this painting and love and depravity and hell, and it's amazing. So anyway, but they sent me a picture of this, and the instructions were, "We've purchased a one-time rights use for a section of this painting, and we're gonna make it into another painting for the movie. And we need you to put our monster," they sent me that picture, "in the place of that bird guy." Can you see the bird guy? He's over here, and there he's there. That's the blow. So this is the section that they purchased the rights to use one time in the movie, and they wanted me to put him in there. And it's like, okay, sure. I can paint Hieronymus Bosch. Anyway, but then I decided, like, I really couldn't paint this whole thing because I had no time, and I didn't have any close-ups. I didn't, you need to see the texture and the brush strokes, right? I mean, it has to look, you can copy it flat, but so I decided that I offered that I could do it in the computer, and then they could, giclée printing had just been like invented or something, and so I don't know if you know what that is, but you can print realistic-looking stuff right onto a canvas, and that was new then. So if I could do it in Photoshop, which I learned very quickly, and send them the file digitally, high resolution, they could get it printed onto a canvas, and it would look like a painting. So that was the workaround on that, and that's how the process of putting their monster into that painting went. Everybody was happy. I lost a lot of sleep on that. Anyway, so just a variety, like when one of those shows was ending, they wanted to give Christine Baranski a gift from the show, and she had, where am I going? Oh, this was her chair, I guess, that she loved from the show, and somebody said that she liked Ralph Lauren prints, and they asked if I could put something between those two, Ralph Lauren print, onto the frame of that chair in a painting for her, a big portrait of that chair, 6 foot tall. So I said, okay. And the challenge here, if you think about it, is that I didn't have A, the chair, B, the fabric, but also I had to make up the perspective of that fabric being wrapped around the seat of that chair. Anyway, that was a real challenge. I don't know that's not so easy. Anyway, so that's in Christine Baranski's house or apartment somewhere, and that was, kind of exciting. So COVID happened, and TV came to a screeching halt, like a lot of things, and no work. I was freelance, but it had a steady run. I don't know, 13, 14 years. So that all stopped, and I went to Chicago for something and ended up stumbling into the museum in Chicago that was having the Art of Comics show, the Art of Marvel Comics show, and which was great and a pleasant surprise, and I went in, and the whole thing was taken over with comics, and they had elevated every aspect of the comic process to the level of art. Suddenly, all the stuff in there looked like art. It was in this really major museum looking very beautiful, and some of my guides were in there, and which I had, it's a big surprise. And anyway, that got me to thinking that all these guides that I had from the old days, and I have hundreds of them, those hand-painted ones with the codes all over them, that were obsolete, were really art, and maybe should be art. So I went back into my boxes, and I picked them all out, and started going through them, and just got very interested in them, and turning them into art, because it felt like it was a lost part of history. And anyway, that's what I started doing while I had COVID downtime, taking these little paper guides and painting them really big. So these are original, and these are all, I own the art, so it's not, I can do that, and it's not even pop art, and it's like the real thing. So anyway, I started doing that in COVID, and then they ended up being in an American Art Collector magazine, and we're at a gallery and sold some, and actually looking for a new gallery. And I do them from time to time now. I'm back to work on a lot of things, so I don't have as much time, but I really love comics and love them. So, oh, here we are. So, yeah, so that was just there's a little pivot when the business changes and you do other things. COVID and TV had downtime for quite some time, and then they went into a writer's strike, which also kept it down. And honestly, it's not ever really returned the way it had been for different reasons, streaming and stuff. People ask me about AI, but that's not what took over the jobs yet anyway. Not my kind of job. But so just to where I got to is I did a couple more children's books. I did posters. I've done illustrations. These are cut paper illustrations, commissions, portraits for pets when I feel like it, because I love pets, private commissions, gallery work for juried art shows, Women Painting Women show. I put some stuff in there over the years, or things were chosen, I should say. Other paintings I do, the striped, they're kind of a meditative process on 13 colors only, and they're done by hand. I don't use lines. So that's just me being crazy. Remember, I said I like to be very neat. So that. Some local things you might recognize. Also commissions for people. My first oil painting, because all those years in that, oil was not something that you could do. So I did that. Lots and lots of boobs for a bra company. All different kinds of boobs, including paintings for the fabric of the bras that would look like tattoos, you know, that kind of fabric. Then you stretch it, it looks like tattoos. So I did a lot of design work for that. I mean, what Kristen and I were talking about, what might be interesting if there were, you know, for when I talk to high school students and younger people about the ways that you can just say yes and try things and catch up quickly, but just keep moving in the world of art, and you can keep working and getting paid, and that's what I have managed to keep doing. So again, TV's slow, and I'm still. This year I did a bunch of flower illustrations for a book that'll be coming out just before Mother's Day called Great Grandmother Remembers. It's a collection memory book that a daughter or son might give to the great grandmother of the family, and grandmother remembers was a million-selling book. It's been around a long time, but actually it's funny because the reason I got that project, again with I can work in any style. The original artist on Grandmother Remembers wasn't well and not able to do this book. And they said, when they found me, the publishers, somebody knew me, and said, can you work in her style for the next book? And I said, yeah, sure. And then in the end, ultimately, I said, well, what if we tweak it a little? What if we tweak it a little? And then in the end, they decided not to do it in her style at all and just let me do my own style and something completely different. And so I didn't work in her style at all, and that book is original, and yeah, it'll be out in May. And then these are, and then I also did a graphic novel this year. Those are, they don't look very clear here, but 121 drawings that working with another artist for an autobiographical graphic novel by Raymond Santana, who's one of the Central Park Five. The book will be published in the fall. And that was also brought me in because the artist who's hired for the book kept messing up his deadlines. And so they said, can you work in his style and keep him moving? I said, sure. And then it wasn't really keep him moving. It was just then share it because I could, and it was using my own style and his style because it was pretty much at the beginning, and then just do this book. So it was really exciting, and I'm very proud of that. And it'll be an important book when it comes out. These are some illustrations of my own. I started writing for the first time, so I don't know, illustrate my own things, you never know. Children's book and 2 children's books. We'll see. Is that it? What happened? Is that it? Well, I guess, I mean, I would just like to say that I think that's it. I think that's it. I did have something I wanted to say at the end here. Let me see. Well, I would add the whole story about the working in any style. One of the last stories that I missed in here was that it transitioned from, in the TV work, it was, can you do, like a Turner or like a this or like a that. It wasn't actually doing the work. It had to be original, right? Because otherwise they get sued. So it's original cleared art. So it's in the feeling of, or the look of, or the style of, that's the lingo that the art director and the set decorator and I would have to just quickly look at something that exists and then riff on that. Oh no, that is my time. I won't keep going.
Thank
Anyway,
you so
thanks y'all
much,
for coming.
Noelle. Such an impressive journey. I would like to open it up to you guys here. Are there any questions from the audience?
Probably not, because I used up so much time. Go ahead.
How fast will AI hit your industry, or has it already?
For TV, it probably has for the next generation of set decorators and art directors, but the people that I work for, who've been at it a long time and are all still, some of them are still working, a lot of them aren't, because a lot of the work has been taken outside of the unions. They were all part of the unions. It's being done in other countries for much less money. It's all about money. But those set decorators and art directors, they're not going to give up their teams in the way they do things anytime soon for AI. I mean, they like to know what they're getting. They like working. It's like a family, They take care of each other. So they would and will keep working the way they like to do it. But the younger ones coming in are playing with it. And like the G-clay printing stuff means you can skip original art, But then there'll be copyright things in there. It's not there yet. I haven't heard it being in there yet, but it's coming. Yeah. They were still sidekicks a little bit. Shadow Cabinet had 3 main characters. One was a lesbian, 2 were mixed, 2 were mixed race. So yeah, I mean, it was still a lot of the superheroes were still going to be men. But the women that were in there were, I mean, Icon and Rocket, I don't know, that got a lot of heat at some point because Dwayne wrote the story where she thought she was pregnant and she was deciding whether or not she was going to have an abortion. She was in high school, and that was in the comic book. And DC threatened to drop us from distribution with that, and he fought to the end, and it stayed. But it was really controversial. I mean, we used to have Quincy Jones used to come by. I mean, people were into it. In fact, my first issue of Static was sold at Christie's, and I think we thought Quincy probably bought it. Yeah. Anyway, April.
You're such a monster, and I mean.
I don't feel confident up here.
You're
I'm confident in the work, but yeah, thank you.
I think that you've brought us so much to think about, but besides all of that, I mean, Noelle and I know each other by sight because we are walkers.
Yeah.
So we pass each other all the time.
Yeah.
And finally we started going like, hi. I have no idea who you are, but hi.
I knew who you were.
And just, I'm so stunned by your line, your ability, your talent, your courage. Really, I mean, there's like an incredible.
There was courage involved.
Yeah, it's super courageous, and
foolishness.
I just want to, hats off because I
Thank you.
think this is really inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And
It was hard to narrow it down, and I know it seemed like it went on forever.
Not at all.
In 35 years, there's so much work.
No, this raced by, and I'm hoping that you have the opportunity to talk to kids at Pearson and stuff, because, oh my God, they would be so inspired.
Yeah, I would like to. I would just this year too. The same part of the pivot and what else I'm doing. I was just asked to put in an application to teach at Parsons for the fall, so I put that in, and we'll see if they're going to do that. But I would love to teach locally. I don't exactly know how you do that because I don't think our teachers leave.
I was just thinking of like a guest appearance. I wasn't.
Oh,
thinking about
yeah.
like
No, but I mean, just
year
teaching in
thing.
general. I did. Yeah, I've done workshops. I did learn how to do comics for the Cooper Hewitt for kids that were chosen from tough schools and tough neighborhoods, but had an interest in art, and they got to come to a 6-week program that I did with them there. And yeah, I mean, short term, long term, I like to share, and I do like to. Kids need to know all the stuff like, don't be late with your work. Don't be lazy. Just use reference. You can't have a great costume, but their hands are like that.
Yeah.
You have to get it right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Have you written any, like, you mentioned the one graphic novel that you're doing with, I can't remember his name now. From the
I'm
Central
doing it
Park
with
Five.
an artist, the Raymond Santana, who's,
Sorry, yeah.
his autobiography.
Are you planning more graphic novels, and do you like Chris Ware's work and stuff like that?
Who?
Or Chris Ware, he did a big fat book called Jimmy Corrigan.
Yeah.
Which was
I think-
all about Chicago
Yeah.
too. It was like
He's
such
a great artist.
He's great, and the
He's
book,
been at
I'll
it a
never
long
forget
time.
it. Was like so depressing for
Yes.
a comic book, like in a
Well,
sense.
the graphic novels they do real life now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
superheroes anymore. It's
Yeah, no, it's
everything.
great.
Yeah, I just was. I've been approached to help someone else work, share, co-illustrate a graphic novel. We have to see how that works out. Everything's kind of a deal. I have one that I've written that I'd like to do. I always give up my own stuff for anything that's going to pay me. So my stuff takes a back burner. But yeah, there'll be more.
I hope you've been richly remunerated because you're quite a genius.
Thank you. I do okay. Hey.
Noelle, has anybody ever helped you? Like, have you ever asked for help for anything?
Look at my face.
Like, in doing any of your work? Like
No.
the 75? No. I know.
I know. It's like, what do you mean?
Like, you're always a one-woman show. Like, never.
No. You know what? I think, no. I just think by the time I explained it, I could just do it. So there's a little bit of that. And then I do now, ish. No, you know what? I was very well suited for a freelance lifestyle. I mean, I'm an early bird, so I had no problem getting up at, if something, television in particular, if it was due that, I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, make a cup of coffee, and get to work. I could paint 10 hours and forget to blink, But it was, just like comics, you get a different script. Batman doesn't look like Superman, doesn't look like Aquaman. It's a different. You have to shift gears all the time, and I love that challenge. And that's how television was. It was like, now this. It was like, that's what I was gonna say before. Somebody last year, they sent me a picture on my phone of a painting and said, "Could you paint this? Could you paint this for me?" This painting. And I was like, so, sure, of course. It's a stock answer. Sure. It's this big in my phone, and it looked like a Hudson River school-style painting. And sure, I can do it. Long story short, getting into it, after I said I could do it, realized it's actually a Thomas Cole painting. I don't know if you know who he is, major Hudson River school guy. It's a 7-foot wide painting that's in the Met. And I was like, huh. So I still stuck with, well, you can do it though, right? Yeah, sure. So ended up going to the Met with that client, and I said, well, might as well go see the real one, and I was prepared to do it, and nervous, but prepared. Anyway, in the end, she changed her mind for some other reason, but it goes back to, sure, Van Gogh, Thomas Cole, whatever. I actually can do it now, though, so anyway. Any more questions? Yeah. Yeah, well, drawing in pencil. The only part of that graphic novel, the coloring was done on the computer, and because we were also making a technique in the finished artwork where we would layer things. He would sometimes draw people, I would do the backgrounds, and then vice versa, depending on who was. He was always behind, I was not, and then we ended up making the artwork that had this very sort of almost collage-y feel, which we liked. We thought it lent itself to the work. So, but yeah, penciling, then inking on top of it, erase out the pencil like comics, and then color in the computer. No. Pen and ink, quill dipped ink. Yeah. For that one. Some of them are still, that's just all painted the old-fashioned way,
Noelle, I have a question over here.
Oh,
By the elevator.
that's
Sorry,
a hand, but your mouth
mysterious,
didn't move.
Disembodied voice, yeah. What will it take for you to take your own work off the back burner and put it out there?
Lottery ticket,
Ah,
lottery win. Well, COVID pushed that, and I was like, well, now or never. And I'm still doing them. I'm back up to some sold, and like I said, I'm looking for a new gallery. And when I get back up to 8, it'll be a whole show. And I have a little more leeway now. I'm doing my own, the own children's book and writing.
have you ever thought of opening your own comic book studio?
What?
Your own studio? Your own comic book studio?
Do I want one?
Have you ever thought about opening your own studio?
No. Because, I still do I like the variety. I think that's what I've enjoyed and still enjoy. I just did a cover for a novel, and he said, can you do the type 2, the whole thing, the illustration and everything? And I said yes, and, I hadn't done that in a while, but, that was the title, I did the graphic, the Butero restaurant in East Hampton. I designed their logo and the head of the steer. So, yeah, I like all of it. I don't know, maybe.
Is there ever a project to which you said no?
No, I don't think so. Maybe it was just being, not because I thought I couldn't do it. Maybe it's going to take too much time, and or needed it yesterday. And actually, I rarely even said no in that case. But no, I don't think so. That's how you keep working. That's what Professor Schoenfeld said at that time. He said, you don't have to be a starving artist. Go to New York and figure it out. Hustle and do it. And I'm still doing it. Yeah.
So because your generation, you started manual and now you've gone digital and now you do both. And do you think differently? What does it feel like?
Yeah, I think I like the computer a lot less than.
Okay, why? Yeah.
I'm tactile. I took a lot of years to get my skill level to the point where I know exactly what that paint's going to do on that paper, on that paper, on that paper, on that canvas. When you're doing a Frank Lloyd Wright watercolor versus a Basquiat-looking, spray paint thing. I needed to know what it was going to look like when I started it and how to do it because it was due, right? I had to get it right. And so to get to that place is very satisfying, right? And it's three-dimensional and it's stuff. You get dirty. I wash my hands 1,000 times a day, but computer, it's really boring. You're just sitting there, and you still have to recognize foreground, middle ground, background. You have to have your art skills. You have to tell the story. If I'm an illustrator, that it can't be, it can't be read if it's a happy-go-lucky scene, right? It's gonna be. So you have to illustrate the story, the emotions. So you still have to be the artist behind that tool. But I think it's a boring tool. So, if that answers your question. Yes.
It was amazing. You're an amazing artist.
Thanks.
I was going back to the beginning of your talk. When did your grandparents find out what you were doing? How did they come
Yeah,
to terms with it?
exactly. Well, I'll tell you, my grandmother died when I was in 6th grade, so she didn't get any of that. But my grandfather found out when I came back from Parsons and told him that I had accepted my invitation to go there, and that I was going to figure it out, because he said, well, how are you going to... My grandfather didn't go past 6th grade. I mean, academics and getting a job were going to be what you did, not art. But I said, Professor Schoenfeld said I can do really well in New York, and I'm going to hustle, and I'll make money, and don't worry about it. And he said, okay. And the only time he actually worried was when he drove me to New York and dropped me off at the Sloan House YMCA. And he said, this is where you're... I said, this is my place. And he started to cry, actually. He's like, we can do better. And I said, no, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to be fine. There are other students living in here, too. And so, yeah, he got to see me. I guess I was 25. So I was already in comics. I was doing stuff, working with the guys at Studio X. He was very proud. Thanks for asking.